Welcome, everyone, and if we could just start out this meeting with a round of applause for Jeremy Harris for his wonderful piano playing to open our meeting. My name's Sal Pizarro, President of the Rotary Club of San Jose, and I'm very honored to welcome you to our 5,389th meeting. I'd also like to, of course, thank a committee. I'll say my favorite committee, I say it every week, the Lee Weimer's Emerging Artists Awards, for greeting us in the lobby today. They've got some exciting things coming up that Sarah Klisch will be telling you about a little bit later. But right now, it is time to have our visiting Rotarians and guests introduced. So let's have our Rotarians with our red badgers with the traveling mics. Please stand up to introduce yourselves. Let's start in the back here with Lauren.
Good afternoon, President Sal. My name is Lauren Edwards, and I am a local family law and estate planning attorney, and my sponsor is Ed Correa.
Great. Thank you, Lauren.
Hi, President Sal. My name is Alan Williams. I work for Oracle in the database product management space, and my sponsor is Heather Lerner.
Always great to have you here, Alan. So if visiting Rotarians and Rotarians with guests could please stand, we would like to get you introduced. Why don't we start over here with Morris?
Good afternoon, President Sal. I'd like to introduce Tony Kim, who is the Vice President at City National Bank over at 1 Almaden, not too far from here. City National Bank, part of RBC, Royal Bank of Canada.
Wonderful. Welcome, Tony.
So good afternoon, everyone. And I'm Ken Lim. I'm from Taiwan. I run in the Taipei Castle Rotarian Club in the district 3482, and it's my honor to be here. Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us at our club today. Where am I? Larry.
President Sal, good morning or afternoon, as it may be.
As it is.
My guest today is Ann Yunnan, and she is the General Manager for City Lights Theater Company.
Wonderful, Ann. Thank you for joining us.
Good afternoon, President Sal, and I actually have two guests here who are contemplating becoming Rotarians. I have Zechman and Rob.
Welcome to both of you. I hope you enjoy the meeting.
Good afternoon, President Sal. I'm really happy to introduce my guest, Debbie DeGudis. She is current Managing Director of Christmas in the Park. Long family history. Her mom was President of the Board of Directors in 2010. Not only did they transition from being part of the city and being funded by the city and employed by the city, but she also was part of interviewing and selecting Jason Mtg as Executive Director, the first Executive Director of Christmas in the Park.
So she's to blame. Okay.
Good afternoon, President Sal. Jason Stein, consultant. I have my guest here once again, Susan Fraser from Jewish Family Services.
Welcome back, Susan. Great to see you. Rodney.
Good afternoon, Rodney Meyer. I have Cynthia Sakula here with me. She's a local attorney, and she's coming for today.
Thank you for joining us, Cynthia. And any more? Yes. Randy Zechman. We're going to give you a microphone later, but okay.
Yeah, I just can't get enough mic time, so. Randy Zechman, Clean Solar. I have two guests joining me today, Brendan Shea and Leslie Gaynor, both from Clean Solar.
Tom.
Hey, Sal, I'm standing in for Art Weisbrod because he's probably late, or maybe he hasn't. How come you haven't introduced your guest?
We got one Arthur there. We got the other Arthur back there.
Alejandrina, who's a marketing consultant.
Welcome, welcome. Any of us are happy to introduce you. Shrad.
Hello, President Sal. I'd like to introduce my son. He's specially abled, Shobh Aaron, and I just hijacked him from school today and brought him today here.
Wonderful. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoy our program. Okay, and that looks like that's it. So I'd like to ask Doug Smith to please join me up here on stage so we can pay tribute to Leslie Marr. Doug.
So Leslie, who left us way too soon, So Leslie was an incredible lady, strong-willed, virtuous, humble, and a great mother. She embodied what Rotary was all about: truthfulness, fairness, goodwill, and being beneficial to all concerned. So Leslie and Rodney were a couple of my first friends in Rotary. It seemed that Leslie had a great fondness and appreciation for good whiskey. So she was born and raised in Chile. Her maternal uncle was one of the founding members of Rotary in Santiago, Chile. He always would tell her that he wished she would have been a boy so she could have been a member of the Rotary. So that early exposure to Rotary was one of the driving reasons that Rodney and his mother Leslie joined the Rotary. At 17, she moved to the US with her parents, not speaking a word of English. She enrolled in the engineering program in San Jose City College and Evergreen College, and she was the first woman to be hired by AMD in the Research and Development Department. She went on to get her BA in English from San Jose State University. She then started a consulting firm where she was able to assist companies with organizational management. Her first client was AMD. She went on to work with many other companies of all sizes and economic sectors. While she was running her companies, she went back to school to get her MBA with a concentration in organizational management from Phoenix University. So she helped dozens of people learn English, many of which they started their own businesses. She was very active in her church. She supported the radio ministry in Nepal, a country that she loved and wanted to visit. She also funded a dormitory in India for Dalit orphan girls so that they could go on to school and break the cycle of poverty and sexual abuse. Leslie was also an incredible mother, raising a wonderful son that didn't fall far from the tree. When she joined Rotary, she was passionate about the military care community. She had a great appreciation for her country. She loved working the Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter celebrations held at the Fisher House. It delighted her so much to see the thrill of the kids with all the treats and gifts they got and their excitement and their appreciation. Leslie always wanted to help those who were less fortunate. As an immigrant who only spoke a few words of English when she came to the country, she found it difficult to navigate the society and culture, and had always wished there would be someone out, reached out to give her guidance. Thus, Leslie made a promise to always help those who were working hard and striving to better themselves. There are many. She noticed waiters and waitresses and bartenders and cleaners and a lot of people from the San Jose area who she gave free advice to because she saw how hard they worked. Many of them took advice from her and bettered their lives, which gave her great satisfaction. So Leslie, she led by example, so that those that knew her or were touched by her would be influenced to carry on her mission, to assist those that are striving hard and have not had the benefit of guidance. So to Leslie.
Leslie indeed made our club better, and we will miss her. We are a lesser club without her, and we are sorry for your loss, Rodney. And Cynthia, thank you for joining us. Next, we will move on to a new member introduction. I'd like to ask Rod Diridon to join me up here. Rod?
Mr. President, we have a new member here who is quite unique. She doesn't live in San Jose, but she's here very frequently providing consulting services. She's a world-renowned consultant in organizing complicated projects and motivating people to get through that process of community involvement and project approval. It's Sherry Tava Fresh Tea. That's worse than Diridoni. No, maybe not. Sherry has a bachelor's in civil engineering from UC Berkeley and a certificate of organizational development from UC Berkeley, despite having gone to that somewhat inferior university to our San Jose State University. She has done very well for herself. She and I chuckle about that, if not you. Her specialty is transportation planning. She's on many boards of directors and commissioners of various advisory groups at the national, regional, and local level. She is relied upon by those who in positions of responsibility and decision-making for providing accurate and helpful information. She has a daughter who's 22 years old, who she's quite proud of, and she has interest in the arts, preservation of historic buildings, poetry and theater, and dance and music. So she'll fit right in with our artistic side in the Rotary. She joined the club because of our climate action programs, and we'll look forward to having her join Mark and Deanna in that area. Please welcome, and she prefers to be called Sherry Tavy.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm really delighted to be joining this club. 20 some odd years ago, I was living in San Jose, and this community was so welcoming that I decided that if I'm going to join Rotary, this is going to be my club. I actually work for a nonprofit down in Monterey that helps people of underserved communities gain skills to work in the tech industry, and one of my main clients and companies is Joby Aero, which is a new form of transportation. For those who may not know about it, it's air taxi, all electric, hoping to be a hydrogen-based transportation form. My background, as Rod very gratefully presented to you, is transportation of all modes, and I do consulting services for folks that are interested in bettering their quality management policies and procedures, minimizing their risk in delivering large infrastructure projects. And one of the gentlemen at the entrance asked me, what am I going to do about the BART to San Jose? And I said, well, I could do something about it, but I'm not involved in the project right now. But I did work on the planning of the project 20 some odd years ago when I was employed by BART. In the last 10 to 15 years, I guess, I've been working on high-speed rail, and I'm hoping to deliver that to the Diridon station so we can actually get that big piece of infrastructure available for all of us who don't want to fly. Thank you very much for welcoming me to the section here. I really appreciate it. And then last but not least, I wanted to share with you the work that we're doing with reviewing policy and laws in the state of California. I'm the chair of the Transportation and Development Committee for the state of California, and we're have a huge number of issues that were introduced yesterday in Sacramento in the Transportation Committee. So we'll see where we go with one of those many, many bills that are being heard. Thank you very much for your support. Thank you.
So welcome, Sherry, and thank you again, Rod. I think that gets you into double digits for this year, maybe. And next, we have another new member introduction. I'd like to have Brenda Sweeney join me up here to introduce our newest member, Mark Silver. Brenda.
Well, I don't know here. I have to follow Rod Diridon, the super recruiter, but I will do my best to do an adequate introduction to Mark. I actually met Mark when he was considering his Rotary journey. He had met some of the members from our club, Carl Salas, Mattia Cosiglia, I think I said that right, and Jeffrey Hare, and then he just decided to come to a meeting. So I talked to him. I had a video call with him for almost an hour on President's Day weekend. So I thought, this is a live one. I got to go for this one, right? So he told me a lot about himself. He certainly is interesting. He's the head of school for Hillbrook School, which is I got to look at my cheater, 87-year-old private, nonprofit, non-denominational, independent school that serves junior kindergarten through 8th grade at the Los Gatos campus and is opening a high school campus in downtown San Jose next fall. So he's a very busy guy. However, when he's not doing that, he is a partner to his wife, Carla, and a role model to his children, Lily, Jackson, and Piper. So when he's not doing that, he likes to read, he runs, which he described as persistent. I guess that's like not Olympian. So he enjoys professional and collegiate sports. Go Stanford. And he loves binge watching, which is not good for me because now I have another source to feed me information about shows I may want to watch because I found out he and I have similar interests. Then if that's not enough, he also produces a weekly podcast. It's called The Education All Students Deserve, which he uses to relay aspects of his life as at Hillbrook and to express his beliefs of the role of school and education in students' lives. And I'm not done. He also just became recently certified as an executive coach. So we went through all of that, and he did assure me that he does have time and he's going to be a great Rotarian. So with that, I welcome Mark Silver to our club.
Thanks, Brenda, and it's really a pleasure to join this group. As I was thinking about what very brief remarks I would make, I was actually drawn back when I was growing up in Portland, Oregon. My mother worked very actively in downtown Portland with an organization that served low-income elderly. And so when I was 8, 9, 10 years old, I would often on days off from school go with her downtown Portland and visit some of these people in very small apartments living on very fixed incomes. And we would often be bringing them a meal. And I remembered vividly, like when I would walk in, and again, I was little, cute, I'd walk into that space, and with my mother and I, like their eyes would light up, and like just the opportunity to have that human connection. And I took so much from that, and it's always driven me in terms of the work that I do, thinking back on several things. One, of course, like the importance of making a difference in the world, like actually reaching beyond yourself to do something. Second of all, issues which are very relevant here in San Jose as well, around homelessness, around poverty, around the elderly and low-income elderly. And then finally, like the importance of connection. and the importance of meeting with people and connecting with them. And so when as Brenda mentioned, Hillbrook School, we're bringing a high school downtown, just a few blocks that way. I was actually over there today. We were just taking some swipes at some walls. We're starting to demo 2 cool historical buildings, the insides of 2 cool historical buildings, and really excited to be able to like revive those historical spaces and turn them into high schools on St. James Park. But the other piece that I was thinking about was how to myself be able to get involved and make a difference in this community. And so I'm really honored to be able to join this group at Rotary. Thanks to Carl and others who like pulled me into this group, and just really look forward to being a member. So thanks.
Congratulations, Mark. Can't wait to see those students in downtown San Jose. Next up, let's have Bill Schroe come up here, and we'll take a look back. Bill, come on up.
Thank you, President Sal. Okay, 1876. It was the centennial of the United States. 1876, Colorado becomes the 38th state of the United States. 1876, the Southern Pacific Railroad finally completes the line between San Francisco and Los Angeles. And 1876, December 7th, nothing to do with Pearl Harbor, there is a major scandal that breaks out in San Jose. On December 7th, 1876, someone named Carmela Fallon comes home to her house and discovers her husband with one of the servants, Maggie McBride, together. And apparently, Carmela, this is all from the court records. This is the amazing historical record you can find in court records, that she grabbed the fireplace poker and beat the heck out of both of them. She fled. She fled for the house, and then the next day filed for divorce, and apparently never set foot back in the Fallon house. Thomas soon left the house as well, and the house was unoccupied for 25 years. But it's interesting when you read the court's documents. Mrs. Fallon's attorney charged Thomas with adultery, which he never admitted to at all. And then she charged him back with great bodily injury, cruelty, mental suffering, etc. And then he also charged her with a deadly weapon with the fireplace poker. As soon as the divorce was decreed in February, he immediately married the maid, Margaret McBride. The maid sued Carmela for damages for bodily harm up for $8,000. You think it's 1876? That's quite an amount. The court gave her $900. The court case divided the family, and the children, some went with their father, some went with their mother. And the most amazing thing about this court case, it was not settled until 1960. So you never know what scandals take place in San Jose. And this story leads us as historians. So they were Catholic. So she got a divorce. So I'm wondering how the Catholic Church felt in San Jose. I also wonder what the neighbors felt. Was there screaming and yelling? If you've seen where the Fallon House is, it's right there on St. John's, right next to the San Pedro Market today. But across the street is the adobe of the Peralta family, and they were living there. So did they hear what was going on? You can imagine, I wish I could find the social scene and social diaries of what happened in this incident.
Sadly, I wasn't around back then. So, thank you, Bill. So I'm guessing Carmela Castro Fallon probably smiling wherever she is today. Okay. Next, Sarah Klisch, come over here and talk to us about the Lee Weimers Emerging Artists Awards Committee, which is a much longer committee name than I usually remember.
It is long, but it's important to get it all in. So I'm very happy to be up here to give you all a little bit of an update. For those that are new to the club and or visitors, let me just give you a little brief. What is the Lee Weimers Emerging Artist Awards? So this award was put in place in order to honor Lee Weimers, who was a former columnist of the Mercury News, and many of us worked with him at the Mercury News. Sal is now the person who writes in his place, so to speak. But he was also a fellow Rotarian and an amazing champion of the arts in San Jose. And so several years ago, 11 to be exact, a group of Rotarians got together and wanted to do something in his honor. So therefore, this award was created, and what we do is give out $20,000 every year, $5,000 awards. 4 artists receive them. They are unrestricted grants. They can use it for whatever they choose, and they've done all kinds of things with it, from paying off car loans to something I'm going to share with you in a moment. You can see on the slide, oh, slide not there. Oh, slide, next slide. That the awards ceremony will be Wednesday, October 18th at the Hammer Theater. We're doing it at the Hammer from now on. It's not going to be here. It's just way better to do it in the theater, so that's where it's going to be. The applications are now open, so if you know artists who should be applying, they have until June 30th. They'll wait until June 29th. We know them. So let me give you, sorry?
I said they'll wait until July 14th.
Yeah, exactly, when we extend the applications. Anyway, what I did want to share with you specifically is how one artist used the money. So Mason Razavi, who was an award winner in 2021, he played at the large club, one of the large club events. He is a guitarist, and he produced this CD because we gave him the money. So in the jacket cover, there is a thank you to the Rotary Club of San Jose, and specifically Lee Weimers. And then he sent a letter to the committee itself, and I'm just going to briefly read it, which is to say, thanks again for selecting me as a recipient of the 2021 awards. As promised, I put the funds towards this album and all that came along with it. The album was released on Origin Records label on February 17th, 2023, and is now receiving airplay and reviews. He wants us to know that he's giving $5 per album sold on his Bandcamp page or in person through November 2023 to San Jose Jazz's Progressions program. Progressions provides instruments, instruction, and other services, makes me cry, to low-income youth in the San Jose area. This made sense for a few reasons. One of them is being the San Jose connection between the Rotary Club of San Jose, Lee Weimers, San Jose Jazz, and myself. This is awesome. This is why we do this. Thank you.
This is why we do it. And thank you, of course, the founder of that committee, Steve Borkenhagen, sitting right here. Thank you, Steve. All right. A couple of quick announcements before we get to our speaker. Of course, the district conference is coming up this Saturday. I hope to see many of you there at the Computer History Museum. Should be a great time. I know, so I see Suzanne St. John Crane in the back. She's going to be participating, as will I and many others. Okay, that already happened, so we don't need to put that in. We've got our firesides coming up at the beginning of May. If you have not signed up for any of them, please do so. They, of course, include the Paint and Wine event, the Art and Wine reception at Larry and Carmen Stone's house. That's a limited number of people who can go to that one. Wine and Music at James Williams Victorian Mansion, James and Lance's place. And of course, not a fireside, but equally important, we have our Rise Against Hunger volunteer event on May 20th at Block Construction. We've got a sign-up sheet out in the lobby, so please join me there. Make sure to note your t-shirt size so we can get you a volunteer t-shirt. And next week, we will be ringing the bell, so please bring your good news. I know, Pat Lucas, you've got some good news right now, right? Just a quick shout out. It is Judge Pat Lucas's last day of work with the court. Congratulations. And of course, she's heading off to Ireland this fall to teach in Dublin. So we'll miss you for a while, but we want you back. So now, Charlie McCollum, please come up here and introduce our speaker, someone we all know well, but can't wait to hear from.
Hi, everybody. Our guest speaker today is the founder and current CEO of Clean Solar, one of the top-rated solar installers in the United States. He is also the founder of 3 other Silicon Valley businesses, Clean Roofing, City Chocolate Fountains, you have to explain that to me at some time, and World To Do. Clean Solar has won numerous awards during his time as CEO. He has served as a member of the board of several nonprofits, speaks regularly at conferences and trade shows, and has been interviewed regularly by news outlets on the state of solar power. We have asked him to talk about the current state of the California power grid as we enter the summer months when the grid is traditionally pushed to its limits. Would you please welcome today's guest speaker and our fellow Rotarian, Randy Zechman.
Righty, you guys must be really bored to hang out with me for a half hour. All right. Okay, so the exciting topic of the energy grid. Woo-hoo! All right, so my talk today is going to be generically about the grid. There'll be a lot of solar stuff involved in that, but I attempted to do a little more of the energy grid. It's a big topic. There's a lot to discuss. There's classes that teach at college around this stuff, but I will focus just on the state of California and what's going on with the grid. All righty, so the past. Everyone is familiar with this. 20 years ago, we had coal burning plants that would send energy down transmission lines. They would go through transformers where they would step up the power so the energy would transmit more freely. You'd have more or less voltage loss. Then it would step down as it went to the home, so the home could accept it, or the business, or wherever it may be. Today, this is what it looks like more. There's a growing need for renewables for obvious reasons, climate change reasons, and so we have this distributed generation causing a major overhaul to our infrastructure. And that's causing lots and lots of problems. So it's arguably the biggest infrastructural change in the history of the United States. So every node, every switch, every diode is being changed out. And the reason that is if you go back to the first slide, you've got all these coal plants that are producing power, and they produce it in one direction, right? It's just going out in this direction from one area. Now you've got all this distributed generation, whether it's on homes or solar fields or on commercial buildings or whatnot, and it comes off of there and will go multiple directions. So every switch and diode and everything has to be changed out. So that's part of the issue with things that are happening from an expense standpoint. And just currently we're kind of caught in transition with a lot of that stuff and policy around that. So this is what the future of solar future of the energy grid looks like. So you've got all this renewable power that's being generated, whether it comes from wind farms or solar or bio or tidal technologies. And that goes to control units, whether that be localized in microgrids or smart cities, or whether that be through utilities, and then it's all pushed in one direction or another based on need. And so then on the receiving end is obviously all these homes, and then storage plays a big factor in that. So also kind of complicating how the whole grid works together. And so what else might be coming in the future? Power outages. And with a snap of your fingers, you can turn those power outages back around, because storage is going to become a big part of that. And so what's the reason for this is what it comes down to. A lot of it is the transitional nature that I'm talking about. And a lot of it is these problems that I will address here. So first thing that kind of started all of this was the need for having green energy and getting CO2 out of the air. And then our state caught on fire. That wasn't so good. And then that happened largely because of a failing infrastructure that has not been taken care of for the past decades. It's a widely known fact in the energy community that PG&E has the worst energy grid in the country. So the FERC, the former chairman of FERC, has recently come out and stated that that it is the least prepared for all the things that are coming in the future. And oh, by the way, we're putting more stress on it than any other state in the nation with the electrification of California. So whether it be Tesla vehicles or heat pumps or turning your gas power into an electric range, all those things are putting stress on it. You add to that the policymakers that are making decisions often on the fly, and those policymakers sometimes make good decisions, sometimes they don't make such good decisions. And of course, change is hard and no one really likes it. And when something as important as the infrastructure of our energy grid, it makes a change even harder. So when things aren't going so well, what does one do in one's life but speed it up and go really fast? And so that's essentially what's happening. By 2045, the state of California is going to be net neutral or net zero as it pertains to energy. And many countries have signed on through the UN and other organizations to meet that challenge by 2050. And 2050 is kind of a key date where there's some can't turn back kind of climate cost and damage to the planet. So that's why we're on this rapid rate to get to where we're going to go. Okay, so policy. So there's a few different entities that are important here. The main one here is the CPUC, the California Public Utility Commission. Many of you might not realize, but that's a 5-person committee that's appointed by the governor, so not elected, totally brought by the governor. And it's not very green friendly, surprisingly. And we know that because net energy metering is just a policy that changed on April 14th. So for those of you that don't know what net energy metering is, it's basically what happens when you spin the meter backwards. So most of you pay about 50 cents a kilowatt hour or so for energy, depending on the rate plan and time of day and all of that. And so when you have solar on your home, and you spin the meter backwards because you're not using all the power in your home, and so you're getting credits from the utility. That term, net energy metering, decides what is paid for at that point. So on April 13th, you were taxed about 10%. So if you were paying 50 cents a kilowatt hour, you would be getting credited 45 cents back. So it seems pretty reasonable. A lot of things are taxed at 10%. And as of April 15th, you'll be taxed at 80%. Okay, so think about that. Do you know any other industry that's taxed at 80%? I don't think even the sins of the world, the liquors and the gases and the casinos and stuff, are taxed at that much. And yet we're taxing something that is vital to the survival of the planet at that much. And the other issue with that is how we're going about doing it, going from 10% tax literally one day to 80% tax the next. And what that might do to an industry. Think about the industry you're in if the cost of it went up at that percent, right? So challenges with all of that. And yet, it's not that simple. So to understand it a little better, you have to understand how we use energy. So 20 years ago, when I got into this industry, we would consume energy on a pretty prototypical bell curve basis. So all the way over to the left here is 6 o'clock in the morning, all the way over to the right's midnight or so. And so we don't consume very much power then. And in the middle, 1 or 2 o'clock, we would consume a bunch of power. So there's this need in the middle of the day for all of that. And then today we have a thing really known as the duck curve. So the bell has turned into the duck. So what has happened with the bell curve over time, over the past 20 years, is the energy still at 6 o'clock in the morning is kind of the same. We don't need very much of it. And then instead of spiking up like a bell curve would be, it's starting to go down. And in about 2013, we had a fairly straight line. That's where kind of that blue line is there, sort of in the middle. We were at a pretty good point where it was going straight across, and then it would peak up a little bit around 4, 5, 6 o'clock or so. But since then, we've put more solar energy on the grid, having more power during that time. So instead of having a need for energy, we have less of a need for energy during that time. Okay? So the policy of let's tax solar because we don't want as much of it as we did 20 years ago actually makes some sense. Okay? But to do it in the way that they're doing it probably doesn't make a lot of sense. So the thought process here is if we take the power that's in the belly of the duck and we put that power that would normally be a straight line and you throw that into a battery and then you dispel it during that 5 to 9 o'clock time period, that's the perfect energy grid. If we can have just a straight line, that's the cheapest energy we will ever buy is this straight line of energy. So that's kind of what we're looking for and what needs to happen and the correction that kind of needs to happen in this space. Okay, so distributed generation versus utility scale. So there's become this kind of competition between the two. Both are renewable energies. Both are producing power from the sun. The distributed energy on the distributed generation on the left is what's kind of known as putting solar on your home or on commercial buildings or whatnot. And there's benefits to that. So the biggest thing is there's low transmission costs. So you don't have to pipe stuff very far. And if you're overusing, then your neighbor just uses it. It eases the grid in times when it's having issues, because again, you can transmit things around easily. And then one thing that's not really talked about very much is empowering the people. So if you consider a worldwide crisis like climate change, and you consider, hey, could we have 7 billion people work on this project, or could we have a couple hundred agencies work on it? Where are we going to get to a better, faster solution? I think our country has determined that that people will drive us to a solution better than centralized organizations. So by having these policies that make it less beneficial for people to have energy independence and control it themselves, make it harder for us to actually get to where our goal needs to be. So part of the challenge here. Now, utility scale has benefits too. It's cheaper, right? Certainly it's easier for me to install a megawatt in the middle of the desert than it is to install it on 10,000 homes, right? And so you can imagine that. But the transmission costs are very, very high. So you think about in this scenario, in that picture, which is a common thing you might see as you're driving down to Southern California, which might be where that picture comes from. When you see something like that, you have to get that power somewhere else, right? That's the whole purpose of that. And getting that power to somewhere else is costly. Normally it's above ground, right? And it goes a long way, and that long distance cost a lot of money. It also causes a lot of these problems like we're experiencing, like wildfires. The more lines we build over air that fall down, the more likely we're going to catch our state on fire. Okay, so problem with that. And a couple of things that people don't realize is that unions and utilities really like these solar farms out in the desert. And they like it because the unions are building them and the utilities are guaranteed profits for building them. So what do I mean by that? Those transmission costs, every time you build one of these farms or build anything that has a transmission line associated with it, PG&E or any utility is guaranteed a profit on it. And if they estimate the transmission cost for that type of field to be $1 million to get it from point A to point B, and it ends up being $2 million, take a guess how much more profit they make. Okay? So it's kind of a disincentivized system that doesn't work very well. And so if we just build utility scale, we don't continue with distributed generation in some way, which we're kind of disincentivized for right now, the cost over the next 30 years is estimated to be about $1.2 billion. And take a guess who pays $1.2 billion. All right. So that leads us to cost and where the cost for energy comes from. So all the way over on the left there, the 2020 figure is on the top. You'll see kind of brownish colors. That's essentially the cost for transmission and distribution. And on the bottom is the grayish type of area, the bigger one. That is that's the import. We have to import power in because we're not producing enough here locally, so we have to import it in. And then in the middle are two things. Towards the bottom, there's kind of darker grayish and blackish stuff there. That's the stuff we're trying to get rid of. So it's coal burning things and natural gas, basically. And then the ones above it that are lighter colored are all the renewables. So things like wind and solar and utility scale. So there's two different colors of red. One's utility scale and one's distributed generation. And so if you move over to the right and you see 2045 to 2050, you'll see that all the dark stuff has kind of gone away, which is the whole point of getting to net neutral by 2045, and we actually start exporting power to other countries, other states. So that's a good thing, right? We're in the federal government kind of looks to do that. So as a state, that's a good thing that we would get to that point. And the hope here is that we get there before the other states do. So then there's kind of a return on that. So that's where that comes from. There is a couple other points here. One is there's this perception that the poor are subsidizing the rich with things like home solar. And so that wouldn't be true. If you look at the graph there, the blue line that's on the bottom is homes that make less than $50,000 a year. And the orange line that's on top is the homes that make more than $250,000 a year. So the blue is the poor, the orange is the rich, essentially. And you can see in 2019, those lines crossed. So actually, poor communities are installing more solar than rich communities as a whole. So good news in general. So storage is the key to all of this. It's the solution to all of it. But you can see now we have very little of it. And by 2050, we better have a bunch of it. And the difference between those two colors is one is kind of utility scale storage. So take those solar farms and you put big batteries around them versus homes that then have little batteries associated with them. And if we're able to do that, we can shift all that power from the middle of the day over to the tougher time periods, and we can solve the big problem, which is those darn ducks. Jobs. So jobs created in this field. So many of you may not realize that today in the United States, not just in California, there's more green energy jobs and brown energy jobs, even though it provides such a small percentage of the overall landscape of power nationwide. And in the Bay Area, we have about 13,000 green energy jobs. And if we meet our goals by 2045 or 2050, then we'll have 103,000 jobs. So you're looking at an 8 to 10x growth in jobs that will be driven by this green economy. So it's actually good business, which makes it a kind of an interesting topic politically. Right, you typically have the right that's on the jobs creation side, which this does, and the left that's more on the green economy side. So that part is interesting. All right, so summary and kind of what's next. So what we need to stop doing is building peaker plants. So I mentioned that the best energy we could have is a flat line of energy. And when we don't have a flat line and there's some spikes, we often have peaker plants that are built to take in those spikes. You can think about a peaker plant as something like a really expensive employee that works 2 weeks of the year and you've got to pay him for the whole year. And so the less of those we can build, kind of better for the whole energy infrastructure. There's needs for all kinds of energy, so we shouldn't be turning off any renewable energies and continue along that path. And distributed generation brings lower costs. So currently the state is not on track to meet its climate change goals, yet we need to get there. And storage will be essential to all this. There's going to be more outages coming every day, as I mentioned before, which is going to lead to all of you wanting more energy independence. You probably all want it now. You'll want it more next year and the year after that and the year after that. And that will continue to happen for at least the next 5 years. PG&E came out a couple years ago and said, and over the next 10 years, it's going to be worse as it pertains to keeping the grid stable. So, this isn't news. Little policies matter, like I mentioned. And so I can finish on a high note. What I would say is California is still leading the charge at the moment, and we want to continue to lead the charge over the next decades. So let's all stay focused on what we really need to do as an economy and grow our green energy. Thanks, everybody. That way almost.
All right, questions. Dan Orloff, you've got a microphone first.
Oh boy, thanks very much. Great presentation, Randy. During the brownouts of the 90s, we learned that 70% of let me say it another way. We had very little power due to the brownouts, but we had plenty of water. But one of the things we learned was that 70% of the state's energy is used, in the processing of water, moving of water. So we were trying to educate people, stop using the water that we have plenty of because it's draining the power. Is there anything about the green energy movement moving forward that would reduce our need for water to move electricity?
Yeah, I think the thing that comes to mind is just over those, those 40 years or so that's happened. And we have a new technology with tidal, right? So they're building plants out in the middle of the ocean that will take tidal wave that will help generate power, right? Which we didn't have back then. So the movement of water is actually helping now versus hurting then. And I might add that when I first joined this club 11 years ago, it was appropriate Dan Orloff asked the first question because he was the first person to reach out to me and invite me to lunch. So thanks for doing that, Dan.
All right, next we have Mark McKenna.
So you talked a little bit about storage a lot and about battery storage, but I wonder if California is doing anything in terms of alternative storage, like gravity-based water systems or wells that store water, that store power, or other alternatives to batteries for storing energy for subsequent use.
Yeah, so what I'd say is I don't know what all those technologies are. What I would say here is that monies spent on developing storage type technologies, there's more money coming out of here than anywhere else, right? So California is probably going to be the leader in this space because where the money flows is where those technologies come from. What those specific things are, I've heard about the gravity one many years ago. What we seem to happen now in our world is we have such access to information that we get all this information and we think, oh, that's coming tomorrow, right? The truth is we've been investing in storage for 20 years probably, right? And it's only really about now, and I really mean now in the past 3 years, that it's really gotten to a point where it's starting to make sense, make economic sense. So anything that's being invested in or starting in now, we're probably a decade away from that. But we're clearly going to need it more. There's no doubt there's going to be more strain on the grid, whether we electrify it or not. There's more people and there's more electronic devices that we're going to be using.
Doug.
Okay, so yeah, my question is along the same lines. So I've heard all the stuff about the requirement for battery storage and the rare minerals that require that, and they pretty much all come from China. So does that make it a net negative to have all the battery storage that's required? And second of all, will homes be a big market for having little gas-powered or generators outside the house to fix when you have the outages?
Yeah, so on that first one, I think it depends on how you think about the world, right? So if we think about the world as climate change is a global issue, how much should we really be drawing lines on where we're getting product from in order to do that, right? Nations are never just going to cede things over to other nations, and so that's always going to be an issue. And there's going to be some nations that are richer in some things than in others, and China may have some items that provide better tools to get there. So I'm not sure, other than developing relationships and developing plants, where that's going to how that's going to be affected. The other part of that, the gas generation. So there's lots of generators around, right? And they're really used much more greatly in rural environments than there are in urban environments. Mostly because many generators are very loud, and there's ordinances around the noise associated with them, as well as those generators are not renewable, right? So you got to go get something to pour something into them, whether that be propane or gas or whatever it might be, or waste fuel of some sort. And so while I think, companies like Bloom Energy are working on things like that, to creating power using waste fuels, I'd hearken back to all these things are needed. And so we shouldn't try to stop doing those things. But with battery storage versus generators, as it pertains today, there's just so much more control over it. And that's what we're going to need. If I go back to the comment on switches and nodes and diodes and stuff that are being changed out, with batteries, you've got more control over how to move that energy around than you necessarily would with generators from that perspective.
Fernando.
Thanks, Randy. On a more local level, the city of Santa Clara provides electricity to its residents, and presumably, are they paying less for electricity energy than those citizens in San Jose?
Half.
Yeah, well, so if that's the case, why not have San Jose do what Santa Clara did?
Is Matt Mahan in the room? So there's four areas where they have locally produced utilities. So Santa Clara is one, Alameda is one, Hercules is one, and Palo Alto is one. So all those have cheaper energy. You see in those areas it's slower solar adoption because it's cheaper energy and people don't have the pain associated with it. So yeah, it begs the question of why is energy so expensive at a for-profit large utility like PG&E? And so there's certainly a movement and an argument that can be made to let's have a bunch of little utilities all over the place. And to some sense, we're kind of doing that with things called CCAs. So the Bay Area, almost overnight, went from buying all of its energy from PG&E to now they buy 95% of its energy from CCAs. Pretty much everyone in this room buys it from a CCA, and you probably don't even realize that happened because it was an opt-out program. So a little bit of that is going on right now, and CCAs are part of the solution to it. But the counter argument to it is that if you look at the United States map of energy, it's kind of divided into three areas. It's the East and the West, with a line going kind of through Oklahoma, and then there's Texas. Literally set up that way, and that's how the Federal Energy Regulation Committee thinks about it. And those being separated cause a lot of issues, actually, with how these states are going to work together moving forward. So there's also this argument too, we can just have one big entity, right, and that controls it all, and then we can transfer energy from place to place. I showed in one of those slides before that we import and export out of California. So my personal opinion would be that the smaller is going to be better, and it feels like we're heading in that direction with CCAs. We just need other states to kind of catch up to the CCA movement.
Barbara.
Thank you. Along those lines, with natural gas, San Jose and other cities are looking at phasing out natural gas, and the panicked folks telling them that they're going to have to change everything in their existing houses. But apparently in the future, all my chef friends are shuddering that they're not going to have gas stoves anymore. Is this a smart thing to do at this time when we know the grid is going to be particularly strained, even without getting rid of all of the gas, water heaters, and stoves and so on that we have?
Yeah, I think this is the billion-dollar question, really, right? And so, I think it depends on where you sit on it, right? I'm a solar guy, so heck yeah, we need to do that, right? and do it tomorrow, please, Barbara. I purposely set up this talk to be this juxtaposition of both sides, right? I didn't want to just tell one side of the story, because most stories are not one-sided, and yet oftentimes I feel like in the news we just hear one-sided stories, right? So do we need to do that? It's clearly better for the environment if we do, right? So it's a better thing. How fast we should do it is the real question. And so should we be doing this at the same time that we're mandating electric cars to be the only thing for sale by 2030, right? Should we be doing that? You know, you could certainly advocate for let's spread that out over another 10 years, but let's not forget that 2050 is kind of a pretty good deadline to, we got to get there, and so it's going to suck a little bit between now and then, because we probably should have stayed on the track that we were on in the 70s when we were putting, you know, solar panels on the White House and developing an electric car, and then kind of throwing that all away, right? So this is the penalty for that crime, you know, that minor crime we created, or you could say it's a major crime, I guess, right? For many years ago.
Okay, well, that's all the time we have for questions. Thank you, Randy. On the plus side, if you didn't get your question answered, I know there was a couple of people waiting. We know how to reach you, and you're here, and we know how to get in touch with you. And I'm sure Randy will be here and available to answer some questions after the meeting. And as usual, we have made a donation on your behalf to History San Jose, which helps preserve our city's heritage, so thank you for that. And next week, so I've got a couple of reminders. One is that, speaking of batteries, we are of course collecting lithium-ion batteries in the lobby. We did it this week, but you probably didn't know, so you didn't bring it, but we'll also be doing it next week in advance of our collection, our recycling event coming up in May. Next week, our speakers will be Jen Loving and Claudine Sapili from Destination Home, speaking on homelessness in San Jose, from lived experience to solutions to end this crisis. Please remember to bus your tables, and that's it. We'll see you next week. Keep the good times rolling till then.